Good afternoon. Hope you're all good. Hope you can hear me okay. As ever, you know what I'm like, always paranoid as to whether or not the mic's on or the stream's working. So if you could do me the courtesy as you all gather for the live audience, throw us a comment. Always appreciated if you can hear us all right. Even if it's just a thumbs up, even if it's a sideways face as if you're reserving judgment, that's still helpful. It pops up and tells me that everything's okay and that you can hear me all right. So yeah, thank you so much. This is first in today on YouTube. Physio Fitness Limited has given us a thumbs up. That is much appreciated. Thank you so much. Really excited today. Uzo should be joining me. He's not popped up. He's not in the waiting room just yet, and so I'm nervous that maybe he's having some technical issues. I'm not sure yet, but hopefully he's going to be joining me soon. It's a topic that I absolutely love, and no doubt me and Uzo will be able to chat it through, if not today for potential technical reasons. We'll talk about it another time, his spicy take on all things advanced practice and what we should aspire to and roles and careers and stuff. Definitely, if not today, then I'll get Uzo back on. But that topic is so close to my heart anyway, so it's not something that's going to be a problem. I always like to open this with a question. Those of you that are tuning in live, what we're going to be chewing over today is advanced practice, first contact practice, the idea of what people aspire to within MSK careers. What I will bring up in a second, especially if unfortunately if Uzo can't find a way to join for technical reasons, then I'll share with you a tweet that he put out recently, which was fairly spicy, which was his continued opinion, and he's been incredibly consistent on this, is that he's been concerned about the fact that MSK clinicians aspiring towards more diagnostic roles rather than rehab roles. And so those points that he's made, and as I say, he's been so consistent with this, but then I've also really enjoyed the fact that he's ended up being someone that intermittently has just said, by the way, let's just remember, it's like every time that it sort of fades from people's sort of concern, Uzo's been really consistent in saying, let's not forget that the magic that's in the heart of this is actually the doing of the rehab is the specialist endeavor, right? And so what has been brilliant, and he really nailed it recently with a tweet that I'll be able to share with you. I've noticed that I feel like I'm talking about him, and hopefully he can hear me because Uzo has joined. I can see in my lobby, so I'll try and bring him in a second. I've just seen that his signal's dropped off a little bit, so when he pops back up there, I'll be able to bring him into the conversation, which is great. But let me show you what I'm talking about a little bit. What he's done recently. This was a tweet of his, which is amusing because he's being sarcastic. He certainly, no one's going to question, those that have been following along won't question what his position is. But just in case Twitter wasn't sure of my position in relation to what is and is not advanced practice, you can still be an advanced practice physiotherapist if you don't order scans and inject joints. And so he also accompanied it with this graphic: advanced practice is not just diagnostics. So he's making clear his consistent opinion that to advance yourself and to advance your practice does not necessarily mean that you just become someone who's in diagnostics and triage, of which he's not, as far as I'm aware, he's not belittling those skills, and we'll come to talk about that if I can get him on the show. He was in the lobby, he's now gone, but there he's back. Uzo, give us a thumbs up if you can hear me, mate, and I'll bring you in. Yes, his mouth's moving. I can't hear you until I bring you in. So I'm just going to give it a go. His signal looks like it's stabilized a little bit. So let's bring him in. Let's stop talking about him and start talking to him. Uzo, can you hear me all right, mate?
I can hear you, yeah.
He's there. That's brilliant. No, it's great. I was worried I was going to get stood up, but you're here now. I've just been talking a little bit about I've sort of introduced your take on the matter a little bit, and also I've been saying about how you've been consistent in two ways. You've been consistent sort of philosophically about your position on this, which I've really admired, because many people sort of wax and wane on it depending on the politics of the time, and sometimes it's kind of fashionable to sort of suggest that those roles are. You've been really consistent, but then also now and again, just as people might be not considering it as a priority, you've sort of piped up with something that's brought it back onto the agenda. And you did this really brilliantly the other day. I've just put on screen for those that are watching the tweet that you put up the other day. But can you just unpack a little bit as to why this is a hot button topic for you?
Yeah, no. So rehabilitation, okay. Look, it's all important, clearly, but fundamentally, all physiotherapists, I think, and I could be wrong, we all start off from a position that we want to improve the functional restoration of the client, the patient, the individual, or whatever. And so, like, when we come into physiotherapy, I don't think many people are thinking about all of the other, advanced extended roles, or whatever it is you want to call it. And I just think, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we can do all this stuff that we call advanced practice, and you'll probably see, I think rehabilitation is, fits into this advanced practice framework. But we mustn't lose sight of the fact that once we've triaged and we've sorted and we've, put the patients into these boxes or whatever it is you want to call it, somebody still has to deliver rehabilitation. And it mustn't be an afterthought. And look, the CSP are doing really good stuff with the right to rehab. And I know there's people out there who are going through, who are working through this advanced practice framework and what's it going to look like in the future and so on and so forth. And I hear that, but I just feel that actually we need to not lose sight of the fact that whilst it's sexy to do all the triage and to order scans and to want to inject and blah, 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 someone has to deliver good quality of rehabilitation. And, whether you call it physiotherapy, whether you call it rehabilitation, whether it's a physio doing it, whether it's a sports therapist doing it, whether it's an osteopath doing it, someone has to deliver good quality of rehabilitation. And my worry is that actually, yeah, we're saying the right stuff, but yeah, it's important, okay? And this is not the people that are doing the work now around with NHS England, Neil Langridge and sort of other people. But I just worry that it's the managers, it's the AAs and 8Bs who are already up there doing their stuff. It's rehabilitation to me seems like it's an afterthought and almost like, well, it's not an advanced skill. And actually, if I go back historically, the reason why I posted the first, I think it was the second tweet I posted, and it was a tweet out of frustration. It was more a matter of, I had a conversation with a colleague who was, at the AA banding, and, what they said to me, and I was incredulous about, they said, well, rehabilitation, it's all protocols, isn't it? And that was obviously like red rag to a bull.
But
protocols. It's protocols. No, it's not. And this is from someone who's very senior. Yeah. And I think if you think that, what chance does the rest of the profession have? And also we've got to think about the next generation as well. People are coming through and they're...
Oh no. I hope it's not just me. Well, actually, I hope it is just me and you guys can still hear him. But I seem to have lost Uzo there all of a sudden. I don't know if that was a signal glitch. He was having some problems when he was coming back in. But yeah, that's such a shame. I could just listen to him riff on that. I was about to come in and try and sharpen up. So questions for Uzo when he comes back are certainly going to be about some of the infrastructure that precedes this, but also I'd love your thoughts. Whilst we're waiting for Uzo to find us again, let me have a little look at some of the points that you're making in the comments, and please keep them coming. What's your take on this matter? Kerry Robinson, quite soon as Uzo was giving his core premise, she was a praising emoji, which I think many of you will be feeling. I've had a lot of response when people knew that we were going to have Uzo on the show. They were sort of supporting his points. Katrina's making a great point here, saying it's true. She had to think so hard as to whether to go into FCP training for failing as a physio. But I really want to deliver rehab to patients, so I've had to be true to myself. So many people are in this funny spot at the moment whereby they're having to consider their career trajectories. There's a lot of people as well that I've spoken to that are feeling a little obliged to move in that direction, even though it does cut against some of their styles of practice. And I think that pressure is something that a number of people are facing. I'd love to hear from you, but I also know that there are a number of people that are really feeling that these opportunities are perfectly timed, and that the opportunity knocking for first contact and advanced practice roles that are being more respected at the higher ends of what is considered a physio license, that feel that actually they prefer roles like that. There are some people that are they're sick to the back teeth of rehabilitating people and going about things that might have done it for many years and feel like actually they're getting sick of that repetitiveness. I hear from those people sometimes too, and they're aspiring to a role that has a bit more variety in terms of its skill set, or especially when it comes to new skills, prescribing or diagnostics, listing people for surgery. Our man Jack March is on YouTube, and he said he's hard to disagree with Uzo, a legend. Of course, that is a fairly consistent opinion, I would say, in the comments and beyond. People considering Uzo a legend. And so, as I say, unfortunately, Uzo's not even back into the lobby yet. I will bring him back on if he can get back on the show. Maybe that was just his mic drop moment. He'd said his piece, and he was not wanting to go on further than that. My take on this is not dissimilar. I can't help but bandwagon some of his points. But I also would say that I think what I would add to that is that there are some people that occupy positions of power and authority now that I would say as well. Oh, it looks like Uzo's back. I'll bring you back in a second, Uzo, mate, and see what your thought is on my point I'm about to make. Is that I think there are people that have grown into the profession and that are in MSK, and they're in a position of power and authority, be that in managerial levels or at consultant level sometimes, that it'd be difficult for them to admit to this, and I don't want to mean to try and read their mind, but fundamentally they have sometimes aspired away from rehabilitation being at the center of their practice. They've become more interventional. These are sometimes people that the triage, the red flag niche screening, the advanced practice skills in terms of systems-based thinking, which is incredibly important, and I'm not diminishing those, but they might have been that, and the diagnostics and the prescribing and the injecting and the listing for surgeries is the thing that gets them up in the morning, and they actually don't want to do the doing. And now me and Uzo are agreeing that that's for us where the sausage is made, right? That's the heart of the care. But I fear that sometimes these are the same people that are then in positions of authority that have actually aspired away from that very thing. So I'm going to bring Uzo back in. Hopefully his signal's stabilized a little bit, and also hopefully he's been able to hear what I've just been saying there. Uzo, are you back with us, mate?
Yeah, I am. Sorry about that.
Don't worry, pal. Don't worry, pal. I was just saying, I hope you heard me. I was just sort of saying one of the variables that seems to me be in play, in my opinion, is that sometimes the characters, and especially the system's been sculpted in a way that sort of does leave rehab as an afterthought. And I was saying that one of the things that may be playing a part in that is that people might have aspired away from that. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think that could be quite reasonable. I don't think that's the case in all cases.
Yes.
But yeah, there are only so many positions where you can be in, where you can influence that change. And you only need to look really around the UK. How many consultant physiotherapists who don't inject, don't order scans, and so on. I can probably only think of two. And I could be wrong, but Angie Jaggi is one that springs to mind. Who's very focused in rehabilitation and research and systems around that. And probably Joe Gibson. I'm sure there's others. I think there's Matt as well. Matt, who works for Connect. And so, I think you're probably right there. I mean, I remember, nearly 17 years ago, my consultant physiotherapist, he was amazing. He was absolutely amazing in terms of his clinical reasoning, his thinking, and his general outlook and leadership. But I remember him saying to me when I was a very keen and motivated junior, and back then I was talking about rehab, and I remember him saying to me, "You're going to get bored counting reps." He was like, "No, what you want to do, you want to be on the diagnostic path, yeah, because that's where the meat is." And I remember him saying that, and he was a brilliant mind, Simon Ashton. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. He's no longer a consultant physio, interestingly enough. But that's quite important, you see, because back then he was saying to me, this is going to be boring. And actually, yeah, if you look at rehabilitation as simply counting reps,
Protocols, like.
then yeah, it's going to be boring. But actually, if you see rehabilitation, okay, as a blank slate, tabula rasa, it's a blank slate. And actually, it's for you, okay, to make decisions with the patient, of course, okay, in terms of where you wish to sculpt that and where you wish to take that, that actually rehabilitation becomes so much more exciting and it becomes so much more interesting. If you then add in, okay, some of the other components, okay, some of the things that we don't do very well in physiotherapy, we talk about agility. We talk about agility. Fundamentally, as a profession, we're pretty rubbish when it comes to doing that. Because what we do, we get out the ladders in the gym and it's an afterthought. Well, jump through these ladders. Okay, well, that's your late stage done. No, it's not. That's rubbish. Unfortunately, and people are going to not like me for saying that, but I didn't realise how much of a fraud I was until I went on an S&C course. And I realised that actually, there's a lot to this. And it's not just getting out a set of ladders and, running through the motions. We don't do it very well, and that's, but that's only a small part. And actually, if you think about it, like, don't call it rehabilitation. Call it just physiotherapy, for argument's sake.
Well, that's what I want to talk about terminology for a few different reasons, but that's one of the things that's sort of essential to it, is that they should be synonymous, but there's reasons why they're not. And one of the things that's interesting, Ravi's made a great point here over on LinkedIn. He's watching the stream and he said rehabilitation is the soul of physiotherapy. I think that's a lovely way of putting it. And also, but whether or not they should be synonymous or not, sometimes that gets contested. What I want to ask though, Uzo, there are some great noises that are being made in response sometimes to some of the points that you rightly continue to make. And as you know, I am bandwagoning to some extent, but fundamentally that's at the heart of my take on the matter and what MSKR has been doing to try and say that rehabilitation is actually the thing that can really bridge gaps to neuro and to quality respiratory care and things, to not be known by interventions and to be known instead by a functional restoration model is something that I think is a great unifier. But the infrastructure that is there for job roles is just so different to what sometimes the noises are being made by NHS England, Health Education England. And I appreciate the fact that sometimes we might need to move the framework and the roadmap that's going to be created, which I've been in sight of and is a brilliant piece of work. The infrastructure for roles needs to change, surely, because otherwise people will aspire there just as a means of the only way of career progression. Do you see that as being a core aspect of what we need to change in order to change the culture?
Can you explain it in a different way for me, Jack? I'm sort of holding on to that, but I want to.
The infrastructure I'm on about the roles being that if the roles are in advanced practice considered to be diagnostic, injections, interventions.
Okay. Yeah.
Can we truly change the culture in a direction that you and I are clearly passionate about without the fact that the role infrastructure, if that doesn't change, then people are always going to aspire there for be that more pay, more status, for all the other reasons that people want to climb a ladder. If we don't have the roles for them in rehabilitation advanced practice, then I don't see how else we could do it.
Yes. To answer your question simply, yes. I think the roles do need to change. But I think there's a little bit of unfairness. And this is sort of, it makes me a little bit restless in as much as, you can be an AA, okay? So let's like break down what is this idea of advanced practice, whatever it means. So there's a leadership component. It's level 7, which they say is which is like MSc level, yeah? Okay, advanced practice and AA or whatever. So there's a leadership component. There's an education component. There's a research component, and there's a clinical practice component, yeah? And again, it could just maybe it's only what I see, or it's only what I've seen in the past. But this level 7, AA role tends to be heavily weighted towards clinical practice, and it's the clinical practice of, do you order scans, do you work in a triage clinic, and do you inject? Because that's an advanced practice. I often say to people, I say, well, if injection is your one criteria, or is one of your criteria for advanced practice, I think you need to think again. Because if an F1 and an F2 can inject into a joint, I'm sorry, but that's not advanced practice.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, what we see is you're right, we see these roles which are very much geared towards diagnostics, and that's why I sent that tweet out. But if we think about it, so patient I saw this morning, classic case in point. It's like we say that, yeah, but we need to show our worth, and we need to show why why you need to have AAs in rehabilitation and so on, because it's leadership and it's advanced practice and we're pushing the boundaries. But I don't see that with AAs. I see them going into clinic and working and triaging patients. Yes, they order scans. Yes, they do injections. I don't see this huge, this huge educational role. I don't see this huge research role. I don't see this huge leadership role. But for some reason, there seems to be a different criteria applied to people if they say, well, let's go into rehabilitation and we need AAs that, oh, well, no, but you've got to push this. You've got to push the research, the education, the leadership bit. Whoa, hang on a minute. That's just unfair. Because in theory, to my mind,
that's the difference, though. In theory, people can talk a good game, but in practice, we're not seeing that getting translated. That the pillars that are being described are being overweighted. And even one of the pillars, it's not just clinical practice, which has got, like we're describing, rehab being sort of central to it, the soul of therapy, which is what Ravi was saying earlier, which is brilliant. But it's actually that's the narrow interventional skills that are considered advanced because maybe they are add-ons, bolt-ons, courses, badges, of which have some clinical utility, but are not necessarily the core of what might be a care delivery. That's what is interesting, though, is that when we're trying to shift the perception and the culture, infrastructure is one piece, and I'm pleased to see that we're agreeing with that. I'd say as well, I'd be really interested in what we can do to make people realise that it's not just protocols, and it's not just because poor care is algorithm and protocol based. What is it that's at the core of what would be advanced rehabilitation skill, do you feel, that is undervalued currently, and what advocacy could we do to make sure that it is something that we better respect?
It's funny though, isn't it? Because we talk about rehab, but actually we could just talk about physiotherapy. Yeah? Because, and maybe I should use an example. So this morning, I saw a patient this morning, okay? He's got bilateral wrist pain and also bilateral thumb pain. He's 42 years of age, and he's a police officer, yeah? Okay, I'm seeing him because one of my colleagues has seen him and is just not sure, yeah? So to go through that, just think for a moment. They've got bilateral wrist pain, bilateral thumb pain, 42 years of age. That patient there, okay, in order to unpick that requires a significant amount of clinical reasoning. Yeah, clinical reasoning, clear thinking, okay, differential diagnosis, physiotherapy, and also to an extent medical differential diagnosis. Okay, so we get to the bottom of it, and it takes a good 45 minutes. Okay, with a history, physical exam, we get to the bottom of it, and then the next step is, okay, now we've got to do the rehabilitation, and we've really got to take this to the nth degree because, okay, your next step is you're going to see a surgeon. Yeah, okay, and we know that actually, well, we don't know, but potentially you're now heading in a trajectory which may or may not be great. But if I bring it all the way back, it comes back to rehabilitation. You still got to do diagnostic stuff at the start. Yeah. Sure. So you're still doing that, but you're just not using a scan. Yeah. But you're not in a triage clinic. Yeah. So you still got to be a good diagnostician.
Of course.
But you've also got to layer that on top of now it's the rehabilitation, because now we're dealing with he's got bilateral thumb pain, okay? He's got wrist pain, okay? And actually, the reasoning around it is this is being driven. The guy's had this for like 2.5 years, and this is being driven, okay, really by the musculoskeletal system, which we need to modify and change with our rehabilitation and our interventions. I don't think he needs a surgical. I don't think he needs surgeon. I don't even think he needs an injection.
Sorry, I've got a bit of a delay. I didn't mean to interrupt you quite so much there, Uzo. Are you concerned that sometimes that initial assessment is then detached from the rehab? Because sometimes sometimes it's a different person as well. someone might, it's what you've done there, and you've had a conversation, you've built a rapport, you've understood that person and what's influencing them. Sometimes it's then okay, sometimes that as part of a triage process, even if done well, is I'm going to book you in with someone else in order to take that forward. Mm-hmm. That detaches it a little bit. Are you concerned about the way that things are sometimes disjointed, or that some services even sit outside? Some triage and diagnostic services, advanced practice services, sometimes sit outside of the actual care delivery.
I mean, I think the honest thing to say is there will be places around the country that do that really well. That do that really, really well. Okay, I was watching yesterday on the MACP YouTube feed. They were talking about advanced practice, and it seems like there's a team in Somerset who seem to do that really, really well. And listening to their particular approach in Somerset, I was like, okay, great. FCP, you can see how there's like a portfolio route, and actually it seemed like on paper this is done particularly well. I'm sure there's other places as well that do.
I worked in an integrated MSK service in Staffordshire, IPOP, where Paula Woods was my consultant there, and that was truly integrated model, and you really were shoulder to shoulder in clinic, advanced practice, and across the bands. But it's something that when it gets disjointed, there are further risks, I guess, to what we're describing. I'm noticing that the time, unfortunately, we're running out of time a little bit. Neil Langridge has made a great point here. I'll bring it up on screen. He said, if it's the case, so this was, sorry, the timing's a bit off, but he was bringing this forward when we were saying that if people weren't able to demonstrate the balance of the pillars, then they wouldn't necessarily be able to be AP registered. Now, this is this idea that essentially the work that's being done to actually credential people into advanced practice would need to be that they demonstrate the balanced approach that we're advocating for. Whereas at the moment, me and you were talking about the fact that people are often within roles that are defined as advanced practice. And so this is a distinction that needs to be made relevant, doesn't it? Because it's whilst we're not, I totally agree, and I really admire what Neil and team are doing with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The culture shift needs to be that people understand the distinction between advanced practice roles as of gone by and ESP before that, and other acronyms that we're using. There's almost a big education piece across not just our profession, but across the sort of MSK industry to truly understand the distinctions that are being made and what this credentialing is going to do and what standards need to be met. Do you think that whilst, how ambitious do you think that project is? Do you think we're going to be able to get that message across, or are we just drowning in acronyms?
No, I don't think we are. I mean, I think there seems to be a big push, to make it happen. I think, my role, if you like, is just to keep banging that drum. And, and I know Neil really well. And every time I say it, he normally sends me a tweet that says, no, we are going to get there. And I'm like, Neil, I know we're going to get there. I've just got to keep banging that drum, because I think that actually our problem is that not everybody sees it the way you see it. And so I just want to make sure that we're in a position where, as a profession, we don't lose the fact that actually it's okay to be a really good physiotherapist. And if you don't want to work in a triage clinic, and you don't want to order scans, and you don't want to inject people, that's also okay in that musculoskeletal realm, because actually it still requires high level thinking. It still requires level 7 expertise, if you like. However you get that, whether it's MSc, whether it's experience, or it's portfolio, it doesn't matter. It still requires high level thinking to do it really well. And the diagnostic physiotherapy bit that we do is important, and that underpins what rehabilitation you do further down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just really to say that that's the case. And look, let's be under no illusions. It is, but at the moment in our profession, the hard path is to go down this physiotherapy rehab route.
Yeah.
The slightly easier path, the well-trodden path, the better funded path is the FCP, old money, ESP, working in a triage clinic. That's the well-trodden path, and that's an easy path. The difficulty is...
I find it interesting because even though, I'm cut from your cloth in terms of the advocacy you're describing, where I want to aspire to quality rehab roles, when I've climbed through in the NHS, I'm not in there at the moment, but when I've gone through that and I climbed quickly by being fairly an early adopter of injection therapy, having that badge, MRI requisition, listing for surgeries and things like that, and being in services that were advanced in that direction. Now, fortunately, I then travelled to make sure I was in an integrated service so I could get my rehab feet wet. But it's just that I know that imbalance is going to be a structural imbalance that we need to overturn. And so I totally, it's something that needs to be fought on multiple fronts. And so I really appreciate the fact that you're banging that drum as loudly as you are doing. And as I said before, the consistency is key. And so every time it sort of drops off a little bit and people are losing sight of it, please do continue to bring it to the forefront. There's going to be more events that we're doing on this, and no doubt more conversations we can have about this. So really appreciate your time today, mate. We better wrap up because I've been keeping to time for half an hour on these. So for a change.
Yeah, no pleasure. And sorry about the dropping out of it. And I think if there's any students listening, guys, all I would say is hold your resolve, because rehabilitation is good. It is good, and it's going places.
For sure. No, it's a great point. We want people to aspire towards rehabilitation rather than away from it, don't we? So fascinating. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Comments are coming in and much appreciated from various people that are watching live as well, Uzo, as ever. And we'll speak soon in various capacities, mate. All right.
Big pleasure. Thanks.
Take care. Cheers, buddy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.